Hi, welcome to the SciGen video series. Today we're going to be talking about disaster recovery. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the two most important concepts to understand before embarking on any disaster recovery planning project. Once you understand these two basic concepts, you can then apply them to your organization and help you find vendor solutions that are appropriate for you. So what are the two most important concepts in disaster recovery planning? The two most important concepts are RTO and RPO. Recovery time objective and recovery point objective. So, for example, we're going to use a company that's using a tape backup solution. They have a tape backup that they run on their server every night that backs up nightly. If this company were to lose its data, it would take a certain amount of time to go get the tape, bring it back, restore its server, and restore the data. The amount of time it takes for that process once they've said that they've had a disaster is our recovery time objective. So the recovery time objective is the total amount of time it takes to bring your server or environment exactly how it was previously to the disaster. Coupled with that is the concept of the recovery point objective, or RPO. In our example, the company that backs up their data every night, their recovery point could be 24 hours. So if they back up their data at midnight and they have a disaster at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, their recovery point would be the previous night. Now there are other solutions that allow you to have a much shorter recovery point, say every 15 minutes. So in a different vendor solution, if that same company had a disaster at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, they may be able to get their data back maybe as quick as 3:45 p.m. that day. The important thing to understand is that the shorter your recovery time and the shorter your recovery point, typically the more money it costs to implement that type of solution. So it's good to think about your business or your organization and know what's appropriate for you. A question that's often asked is, well, how do I know? How do I know what's appropriate? Typically, the more transactions you have, the shorter your recovery time or the shorter your recovery point needs to be. Another question people ask in this is they ask, what would an hour of downtime cost me? Typically, someone that's doing a lot of production, if they were to not have their systems available to them for a certain amount of time, it would cost their organization, a certain amount of money. And therefore, they may be willing to spend more to ensure that that doesn't happen. So here are two different examples you can think of and see how they contrast each other with recovery time and recovery point objectives and how one might be willing to spend more than the other. I'm going to use two different examples from the financial services industry. One is what we call an institutional money manager. These companies typically make their money based on a percentage of the assets they manage. So you may have $10,000 invested with this company and they charge you 1% of that. And it doesn't matter whether they trade once a year or 1,000 times a year. They still make the same amount of money. So for them, if their systems were unavailable, they would still get that money and they may not have a hard number associated with the amount of downtime they experience. Now they may not like it because they want to trade your account at certain given opportune times in the market, but it may be harder to justify for organizations like that. Now let's contrast them with an institutional stock brokerage firm or someone like the New York Stock Exchange. Could you imagine if the New York Stock Exchange couldn't trade for a certain number of hours, let alone even days? A lot of money would be lost by all of the institutional trading firms that make their money based on all the transactions that happen throughout the day. So for them, they're willing to spend more money to lower that recovery time or recovery point objective. So now that you understand these two concepts, you can start to look at different vendor solutions that might be appropriate for your budget and your organization. Thank you.